My grandson looked me in the eye and told me I was too old and ugly to be at his wedding. His fiancée said my wheelchair would ruin their photos and suggested I watch from the parking lot. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just the grandmother they were ashamed of. I was the one holding the deed to their dream venue and the strings to a fortune they'd already spent in their minds. They thought I'd die quietly in that nursing home they picked out for me. Instead, I gave them the wedding of their dreams, let them dance under those crystal chandeliers one last time, and then I pulled every single string. I still remember the morning everything changed. I'd been awake since 4, too excited to sleep. My hands, weathered from 78 years of living, carefully smoothed the emerald dress I'd bought specially for the occasion. It had tiny gold buttons down the front, the kind Marcus used to count when he was small, sitting on my lap during Sunday services. The dress cost more than I usually spent in a month, but this wasn't just any day. My only grandson was getting married, and I wanted to look like the grandmother he could be proud of. I'd even had my hair done at the salon, the silver strands twisted into an elegant bun. The hairdresser had tucked in small pearl pins that caught the light. I'd raised Marcus after his parents died in that accident. 10 years old, angry at the world, showing up at my door with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and eyes that had seen too much. I was already 68 then, living on Social Security and whatever I could make from my sewing. But we made it work. I taught him to tie his shoes again when the trauma made him forget. I sat through his nightmares, made his favorite buttermilk pancakes every Sunday, and cheered the loudest at every graduation. The kitchen counter held the gifts I'd wrapped the night before, an antique pocket watch that had belonged to his great-grandfather, and a photo album I'd assembled with pictures from every year I'd raised him. There was one of him missing his front teeth, grinning while holding a fish we'd caught at Miller's Pond. Another showed him in his high school cap and gown, my arms wrapped around him as we both cried happy tears. I checked my reflection once more, practicing my smile. The wheelchair was new. My hips had finally given out, but I'd ordered one in pearl white to match my outfit. Today, I thought, Marcus would see that his old grandmother could still clean up nice. Marcus arrived at noon, but he wasn't alone. His fiancée, Vanessa, stepped out of their BMW first, her heels clicking against my worn driveway like gunshots. She wore designer sunglasses despite the overcast sky and a coat that probably cost more than my monthly medications. Marcus followed, adjusting his tie, not meeting my eyes. "Grandma Eleanor," he said, the words stiff and formal. Not Nana like he'd called me for 18 years. He didn't comment on my dress or my hair. He didn't even help me when I struggled to wheel myself closer to the door. "You both look wonderful," I said, my voice warm despite the chill in the air. "Would you like some tea? I made those lemon cookies you love, Marcus." "We can't stay long," Vanessa interrupted, checking her phone. "We have appointments with the caterer and the venue coordinator." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Nana, that's why we're here. We need to talk about the wedding." My heart swelled. Finally, they were including me. "Of course, I'd love to help. I could make my famous quilted table runners or help with the flowers. I still remember how to—" "No," Marcus cut me off. His voice was sharp, unfamiliar. "That's not what I mean. Vanessa and I think it would be better if you didn't attend." The words hit me like ice water. I gripped the arms of my wheelchair, certain I'd misheard. "I don't understand." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Eleanor, let's be realistic. The venue has stairs everywhere. Your wheelchair would be a logistical nightmare. Plus, the look we're going for is very modern, young, fresh." "I'm not fresh." I tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. Marcus finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. "You know what she means. The chair, the way you dress, your health issues. It's a lot. Our friends are all young professionals. You'd feel out of place. I raised you, I whispered. And I'm grateful, he said quickly, like reading from a script. But this is our day. We need it to be perfect. You understand, right? You always said you wanted the best for me. Vanessa pulled out her phone, scrolling. We found a lovely assisted living facility that does virtual viewing for events. They can set up an iPad so you can watch the ceremony. It's practically like being there. Without actually being there, I said. Exactly. Vanessa smiled like I'd solved a math problem. See? You get it. Marcus squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that once meant love, but now felt like a dismissal. We knew you'd understand. You're so practical, Nana. Always thinking of others first. Vanessa walked past me into my living room without invitation, her eyes scanning everything like an appraiser. Is this where you've been living all these years? She ran a manicured finger along my bookshelf, checking for dust. It's so quaint. It's home, I said quietly, wheeling myself inside. She picked up a framed photo of Marcus's high school graduation, the one where he's hugging me, both of us crying. You'll need to sort through all this anyway when you move to the facility. They have strict rules about personal items. 1 photo, maybe 2. I'm not moving to any facility, I said firmly. Marcus's jaw tightened. Nana, be reasonable. You can barely take care of yourself. The wheelchair, the medications. I've been managing fine for... You fell last month, he snapped. Mrs. Chen next door had to call me. Do you know how embarrassing that was? Getting a call in the middle of a client meeting because my grandmother can't admit she needs help. Embarrassing. That's what I'd become to him. Vanessa had moved to my china cabinet, eyeing the antique plates. These might actually be worth something. You should have them appraised before you move. The facility will need a full asset disclosure anyway. Those were my mother's, I said. Even better. Antiques are very in right now. She turned to Marcus. We could use them for the rehearsal dinner. Give it that authentic touch. You want to use my mother's plates but not have me there? Marcus's face darkened. Don't be dramatic, Nana. This is exactly why we can't have you at the wedding. You make everything about you, just like you did with Mom and Dad's funeral. The room went silent. Even Vanessa looked uncomfortable. I made your parents' funeral about me? My voice was barely a whisper. You cried through the whole service, made a scene. Everyone was staring at you instead of honoring them. I was grieving my daughter, I said, tears building. Your mother was my only child. And you've been guilting me with it ever since, Marcus shot back. Poor Grandma Eleanor, having to raise her grandson. Poor Grandma Eleanor, sacrificing everything. Did you ever think maybe I didn't want your sacrifice? Maybe I wanted a normal life? Vanessa placed a hand on his arm. Baby, we should go. The caterer... You know what? Marcus continued, his voice rising. Dad was right about you. He told Mom you were suffocating. That's why they rarely visited. That's why they were driving so late that night, trying to get home after another guilt trip from you. Each word was a knife, precisely aimed. He'd been saving them, sharpening them, waiting for the right moment to strike. After they left, I sat in my wheelchair for hours, staring at the gifts I'd wrapped so carefully. The front door was still open, letting in the cold spring air, but I couldn't move to close it. Marcus's words echoed in the empty house, bouncing off walls that had heard his laughter, his tears, his first words after the accident. I didn't cry. Crying would mean accepting what had just happened, and I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I wheeled myself to the kitchen and made tea with mechanical precision. Earl Grey, 2 sugars, a splash of milk, the same way I'd made it every afternoon for 40 years. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even. I was a statue in a wheelchair, sitting at my kitchen table, sipping tea like the world hadn't just tilted off its axis. The photo album I'd made for Marcus lay on the counter. I opened it slowly, turning each page with careful fingers. There he was at 11, missing a tooth, proud of the model airplane we'd built together. At 14, awkward in his first suit for the school dance. At 18, accepting his diploma while I cheered from the audience. When had that boy disappeared? I closed the album and placed it in the trash can. Then I took it out. Then I put it back in. Finally, I left it on the counter, unable to decide its fate. My reflection in the kitchen window showed an old woman in an expensive dress, pearl pins still gleaming in her silver hair. I looked ridiculous, like someone playing dress-up, pretending to be something she wasn't. Vanessa was right. I didn't fit their image. I was outdated, an embarrassment. But as I stared at my reflection, something else stared back. Behind the hurt, beneath the shock, something harder began to crystallize. I wheeled myself to my bedroom, to the closet Marcus had never seen me open. Behind the winter coats and old photo boxes was a filing cabinet, locked and forgotten. Inside were documents he knew nothing about, papers that told a different story than the one he'd written in his mind. "You want me gone?" I whispered to the empty room. "You want to erase me like I never existed?" I pulled out the first folder, thick with legal documents. Then the second. Then the third. By the time I'd emptied the cabinet, my bed was covered with papers, deeds, contracts, bank statements, investment portfolios. The fortune I'd built in silence while everyone thought I was just a poor old woman living on Social Security. "Thank you, Marcus," I said to the photo on my nightstand, one of him as a baby, before he learned to be cruel. "Thank you for showing me who you really are. Now let me show you who I really am." The woman in the wheelchair smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. I spread the documents across my dining table like a general planning a war. Each paper told a story Marcus never knew, a life he'd never bothered to ask about. While he was embarrassed by my modest house and simple clothes, I'd been quietly building an empire. It started with grief money, the life insurance from my daughter and son-in-law's death. Marcus assumed I'd spent it all raising him, and I let him believe that. The truth was more complicated. I'd lived on my Social Security and sewing money, yes, but every penny of that insurance had gone into investments. The first property was a rundown apartment building on Maple Street. Everyone said I was crazy, buying in that neighborhood. But I saw what others didn't. The new highway extension plans, the proposed shopping center. I bought it for $60,000 and held on. Today, it was worth $2 million. Then came the patents. My late husband, Marcus's grandfather, had been an inventor. Small things, kitchen gadgets, tool improvements, nothing flashy. When he died, everyone thought his workshop junk was worthless. But I'd kept his notebooks, hired a patent attorney with my savings, and filed the paperwork. 3 of his designs were bought by major manufacturers. The royalty checks came quarterly, quiet and consistent. The crown jewel was something else entirely. I pulled out the booking contract from Marcus's wedding file. The Rosewood Estate, the most exclusive venue in the state. Marcus had been living on credit cards and loans, counting on my death to pay for his lifestyle. When he'd booked Rosewood, he'd used my name as a reference, claiming family connections. The venue had approved it because they recognized the name, not Eleanor Hartley, but EMH Holdings, the company that owned them. I'd bought the estate 15 years ago when it was just an abandoned mansion, restored it piece by piece, and now rented it out for exactly the kind of events Marcus wanted me banned from. The irony was delicious. He'd chosen my own venue to exclude me from. I picked up the phone and dialed Patricia Wong, my attorney for the past 20 years. She answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, how are you feeling?" "Like rewriting my will," I said simply. Patricia paused. I see. Should I come by tomorrow? Tonight if you can. And Patricia, bring the paperwork for the Hartley Foundation too. It's time to activate it. The Hartley Foundation, my secret project. A nonprofit I'd established years ago to help grandparents raising grandchildren after tragedy. It existed only on paper so far, waiting for the right moment to fund it properly. Eleanor? Patricia's voice was careful. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect, I said, looking at the photo of Marcus on the mantle. I just realized it's time to stop pretending to be something I'm not. After I hung up, I wheeled myself to the window. Outside, the world went on as usual, but inside my modest house, surrounded by my worthless old things, a wealthy woman was about to change everything. Patricia arrived at 7 sharp, carrying her leather briefcase and wearing the no-nonsense expression that had made her the best estate attorney in the city. She took one look at my face and the documents spread across the table and understood immediately. Marcus? She asked simply. He's getting married at the Rosewood Estate, June 15th. I'm not invited. Apparently I don't fit the image. I pushed the booking contract across the table. He doesn't know I own it. Patricia's eyebrows rose as she read the contract. He booked his wedding at your venue? Used my name as a reference. Family connection, he told them. They approved it because EMH Holdings, my company, owns the property. The booking staff doesn't know I'm EMH. They just know the owner approved all bookings with the Hartley name. I smiled grimly. He's counting on inheriting everything when I die, already spending money he doesn't have. And the will currently leaves everything to him? Every penny. The properties, the patents, the Rosewood Estate. All of it. I rolled my wheelchair closer to the table. I want to change that. To whom? The Hartley Foundation. All of it. Patricia pulled out her laptop, fingers already flying across the keys. We'll need to be careful. Make it airtight. If he contests, he won't have grounds. I'm of sound mind. You can have Dr. Martinez provide a statement if needed. I smiled. I had my cognitive assessment last month. Perfect scores across the board. We worked through the night, methodically transferring my assets. The apartment building on Maple Street would be sold, proceeds going to the foundation. The patent royalties would be redirected. The Rosewood Estate would become the foundation's headquarters, offering support services to grandparents starting over. There's one more thing, I said, as Patricia prepared the final documents. I want to attend the wedding. She looked up sharply. Eleanor, are you sure? I own the venue. I have every right to be there, but I'll be discreet. After the ceremony starts, I'll enter through the service entrance, sit in the back garden where they're having cocktails. I pulled out another document. And I want you to deliver certain papers to Marcus during the reception. Legal documents, financial documents, the truth about what he's lost. The timing? 1 hour into the reception. Let them have their perfect photos first. Then let them understand exactly what they threw away. Patricia studied me. You're sure about this? Once I file these papers, there's no going back. He made his choice when he said I was too ugly for his wedding, I said. I'm just honoring it. We finished at midnight. The new will was signed, witnessed, and irrevocable. The foundation papers were filed. The instructions for the venue were clear. One more thing, Patricia said, packing up. What about after? Where will you go? I hadn't thought that far ahead, but suddenly I knew. Somewhere warm. Somewhere no one knows me as Marcus's grandmother. Somewhere I can just be Eleanor. Patricia squeezed my hand. You deserve that. You deserve so much more than what he gave you. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, the weight of what I'd done settling in. But I felt no regret, only clarity. And perhaps For the first time in years, hope for something beyond being needed. The next morning, I began the systematic process of erasing Marcus from my life, just as he'd erased me from his. But unlike his cruel dismissal, mine was methodical, purposeful, a clearing of space for something better. I started in his old room, untouched since he'd left for college. Baseball trophies lined the shelves, their cheap gold plastic now dull with dust. I packed them carefully, not out of sentiment but precision. Each item went into boxes labeled for donation. Some child who still valued love over appearances might treasure them. The quilts I'd made for his bed, hand-stitched during long nights when he had nightmares, folded neatly into bags for the women's shelter. The desk where we'd struggled through homework together was scheduled for pickup by Habitat for Humanity. Every trace of the boy who'd called me Nana was cataloged and removed. In my jewelry box, I found the cheap bracelet he'd bought me with his first paycheck from McDonald's. "For the best grandma in the world," the engraving read. I held it up to the light, remembering his proud 16-year-old face when he'd given it to me. Then I placed it in the donation box. Some other grandmother deserved to wear it, one whose grandson still saw her as human. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked while I was packing. Her son James had told her about yesterday's visit. She found me surrounded by boxes and memories in transition. "Eleanor," she said softly, "James told me what happened. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I replied. "Be helpful. Is James still working at the Tribune?" "Yes, he's their lead investigative journalist now." "Why?" "Because I have a story for him, but not yet. After the wedding." I handed her a sealed envelope. "Give this to him on June 16th. Tell him to bring a photographer." Mrs. Chen took the envelope, studying my face. "What are you planning?" "Justice," I said simply, "and a future for grandparents who are appreciated." After she left, I continued my purge. The birthday cards went into the fireplace, 28 years of handmade cards, each one signed "Love Nana." The flames ate the construction paper, the glitter, the crayon drawings, the evolution from childish scrawls to teenage indifference. I watched them curl and disappear, taking with them the grandmother who'd given everything and asked for nothing in return. By evening, the house felt different, lighter. The empty spaces where Marcus's presence had lived now held possibility instead of memory. I called a real estate agent, arranged for the house to be listed after the wedding. The proceeds would go to the foundation, helping grandparents who needed what I no longer did, a place to raise ungrateful children. That night, I looked through my closet with new eyes. The pearl pins went into a small box for donation. The emerald dress I'd worn with such hope joined the charity pile. In their place, I laid out a simple black dress for the wedding. Nothing special. Nothing that screamed, "Look at me." Just appropriate attire for a property owner inspecting her investment. I wasn't trying to be beautiful anymore. I was done being aesthetic. I was ready to be powerful. My invitation to Marcus's wedding came in an unexpected way. Thomas, my property manager at Rosewood, called 2 days before the event. "Mrs. EMH," he said, using the company name as always. "I wanted to confirm the special arrangements for the Williams-Chen wedding on the 15th. You mentioned wanting to inspect the property that day?" "Yes," I replied. "I'll arrive after the ceremony begins. I want to see how they're using the space." "Of course. I'll have a golf cart ready at the service entrance. You'll have full access to all areas, including the garden where they're holding cocktails." Perfect. My own venue, my own rules. No need for an invitation to a property I owned. I spent the next 2 days finalizing arrangements. Patricia confirmed all the legal documents were ready. The foundation's board was assembled, ready to take possession of the assets. James Chen had received my envelope from his mother, promising to wait until the specified date to open it. The morning of June 15th dawned clear and warm. The Rosewood estate had never looked more magnificent. I knew because I'd driven past at dawn in my modified Honda. Marcus never knew I could still drive. The hand controls had been installed years ago. Florists' trucks lined the service drive, unloading thousands of white orchids and roses. The wedding of the year, the society pages would call it. Young couple, bright futures, stunning venue. If only they knew. I returned home to prepare. The black dress slipped on easily. No struggle with tiny buttons or zippers. Comfortable shoes replaced the heels I'd once forced myself into. I looked in the mirror and saw exactly what I was. An old woman with secrets, about to reveal them all. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Everything is in place. I'll arrive at 2 p.m. sharp with the documents. Another text, this one from Thomas. The ceremony is scheduled for 1 p.m. in the Rose Garden. Cocktails in the main garden at 1:30. Your usual parking spot is reserved. I spent the remaining hours in quiet preparation. Not of my appearance, those days were over, but of my heart. I meditated on forgiveness. Not for Marcus, but for myself. For believing love could overcome cruelty. For thinking I could build a bridge strong enough to span the gap between who he was and who I'd hoped he'd be. At 12:30, I got into my Honda and drove toward Rosewood. The handicapped parking placard hung from my mirror, another thing Marcus found embarrassing. Do you have to display it everywhere? He'd asked once. People will think you're weak. No, I thought, pulling into my reserved spot at the venue I owned. People will think I'm exactly what I am, a survivor who built an empire while everyone underestimated her. Thomas met me with the golf cart as promised. The ceremony just started, he whispered. The garden is set up beautifully. They spared no expense. Of course they didn't, I replied. They thought someone else was paying for it. Time to show them who that someone really was. From my position at the garden's edge, partially hidden behind a lattice covered in jasmine, I could see everything. The cocktail hour was in full swing, guests mingling with champagne flutes while a string quartet played softly. Marcus stood near the fountain in his gray tuxedo, laughing with business associates. Vanessa glided between groups in her designer gown, playing the perfect bride. I noticed her grandparents sitting alone at a small table in the corner, barely acknowledged by anyone. The elderly couple looked uncomfortable, out of place among the young professionals. I made a mental note to speak with them later. At exactly 2 p.m., Patricia entered through the main garden doors. Her navy suit was impeccable, her stride confident. The leather portfolio in her hands contained Marcus's future, or rather, his lack of one. She walked directly to Marcus. I couldn't hear the words from my distance, but I watched the scene unfold. His initial smile at seeing a well-dressed woman approach, the confusion when she introduced herself, the moment she handed him the envelope marked with his name. What's this about? I saw him mouth, still smiling. He opened the envelope. The smile froze, then crumbled. His face went through a series of transformations: confusion, disbelief, anger. Vanessa noticed something was wrong and rushed over, champagne glass still in hand. What is it? She demanded, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Marcus couldn't speak. He handed her the papers with trembling hands. She scanned them quickly, her expression shifting from annoyance to shock. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stone path. The sound drew everyone's attention. Conversation stopped. The quartet faltered mid-song. "This can't be legal!" Vanessa shrieked. "She can't do this!" "Where is she?" Marcus's voice carried across the garden. "Where is my grandmother?" Thomas stepped forward smoothly, as we'd planned. "Mr. Williams, your grandmother is seated in the garden. She owns this venue and wanted to see how you used it for your special day." The crowd parted as Marcus stormed through, Vanessa trailing behind. They found me sitting quietly by the jasmine, hands folded in my lap. "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly. "The wedding was beautiful. Everything you dreamed of." "What did you do?" He waved the papers at me, his face flushed. "What is this?" "Your inheritance," I replied. "Or rather, your lack of one. You made it clear I'm too ugly, too old, too embarrassing to be part of your life. So I've removed myself, and everything that came with me." "You can't. This is illegal. I'll sue." Patricia stepped forward. "Everything is completely legal, Mr. Williams. Your grandmother was of sound mind when she changed her will. I have the medical documentation if you'd like to contest it in court." "But the money, the properties, Rosewood," Vanessa sputtered. "All transferred to the Hartley Foundation," I said. "It will help grandparents who are valued by their families. As for Rosewood, you're standing in it. I've owned it for 15 years. "You own this place?" Vanessa's voice cracked. "You own Rosewood?" "Through my company, EMH Holdings, Eleanor Marie Hartley." I gestured to the gardens around us. "Every rose, every stone, every crystal chandelier you admired, all mine. The venue you thought was too good for me to attend? I bought it, restored it, and built it into what you see today." Marcus dropped to his knees beside my wheelchair, a gesture that would have moved me weeks ago. Now I saw the performance in it. "Nana, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things. I was stressed, the wedding pressure." "Don't you dare!" Vanessa snapped at him. "This was your idea. You said she was an embarrassment. You said she'd be dead by now anyway." The garden went completely silent. Even the waiters froze mid-step. Someone had their phone out, recording. "There it is," I said softly. "The truth. You weren't just ashamed of me, Marcus. You were waiting for me to die, planning on it, already spending money you didn't have because you assumed I'd be gone." "That's not... I didn't mean..." "The booking contract," Thomas interrupted, pulling out his tablet, "shows a remaining balance of $47,000. It was to be paid from Eleanor Hartley's account, but those accounts are now transferred to the foundation. Payment is due immediately." $47,000? Vanessa turned on Marcus. "You said your grandmother was covering everything." "She was supposed to... I thought..." "You thought I'd be dead," I finished. "You took out loans, maxed out credit cards, lived like you were already rich. All because you assumed your ugly, embarrassing grandmother would have the courtesy to die on schedule." Patricia added, "The foundation's board has also asked me to inform you that the house on Elm Street, the one you've been telling people you inherited, is being sold. You have 30 days to vacate." "What house?" Vanessa grabbed Marcus's arm. "What else have you been lying about?" The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama better than any soap opera. I recognized several society reporters among them, their phones recording everything. "Marcus has been living in a property I own," I explained to Vanessa. "Rent-free for 3 years. He told everyone he'd inherited it early, another lie built on my expected death." Vanessa's face went from red to white. "You told me you were rich. You said your grandmother had millions. I didn't sign up for this." "Then maybe you signed up for the wrong reason," I said. She spun around, her designer dress catching on a rosebush, tearing. "This is fraud. I'm getting this marriage annulled." "We just got married 2 hours ago," Marcus protested. "And I want out now." Vanessa stormed off, her bridesmaids scrambling to follow. Marcus remained on his knees, his tuxedo dirty from the garden path. Around us, guests whispered and recorded. Tomorrow, this would be everywhere. "Get up," I said quietly. "You're making a scene. I thought you hated those." 6 months later, I signed the last document with a steady hand, officially opening the Hartley Foundation's residential wing. 24 units, each designed for grandparents raising grandchildren, fully accessible, with on-site counseling and legal services. The first families would move in next week. "This is remarkable, Eleanor," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the foundation's new director. "We've already received over 100 applications." I nodded, watching through the window as contractors put the finishing touches on the playground. Every one of those applications is a grandparent who stepped up when no one else would. They deserve more than being hidden away when they're no longer convenient. The news coverage had been extensive. James Chen's article series, "The Grandmother Who Owned Everything," won a Pulitzer nomination. The wedding video went viral. Millions watched Marcus beg on his knees while Vanessa stormed off. Their marriage was annulled within a week, each blaming the other for the humiliation. Marcus tried to contest the will, of course, but Patricia had been thorough. He spent what little savings he had on lawyers who told him the same thing. I'd been completely within my rights. The medical documentation was clear. The will was properly executed, and his own words at the wedding, captured on dozens of phones, proved why I disinherited him. "Mrs. Hartley?" Thomas knocked gently. "You have visitors." I turned my wheelchair, expecting another reporter. Instead, I saw Vanessa's grandparents, the elderly couple I'd noticed at the wedding. With them was Mrs. Chen and her son, James. "Mrs. Hartley," the old man said, hat in his hands. "We wanted to thank you. What you did, standing up to them like that, it opened our eyes." His wife nodded. "Vanessa hasn't spoken to us in years, only invited us to the wedding because her mother insisted. We sat in the back, just like you." "We want to help," he continued. "We have some money saved, not millions like you, but enough. We want to donate to your foundation." I felt warmth spread through my chest. "We need volunteers more than money. Reading to children, teaching skills, sharing wisdom. Would you be interested?" Their faces lit up. Yes, we would love that." We moved to the foundation's community room, where I served tea in my mother's china, the same set Vanessa had coveted. As we talked, more people arrived. Grandparents who'd heard about the foundation, some bringing donations, others offering time and skills. That evening, I returned to my apartment on the foundation's top floor. I'd sold the old house, donating the proceeds. Everything I needed fit in these 3 rooms with a view of the garden where children would soon play. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Nana, I know you hate me. I understand. But I wanted you to know. I remember the pancakes. I remember the baseball games. I remember when I was worth more to you than money. I'm sorry I forgot that. I'm sorry I became someone who could forget that. I'm working 2 jobs now. Vanessa took half of nothing, which was still nothing. Maybe that's what I needed. To have nothing and remember what something really means." I read it twice, then deleted it. Some bridges, once burned, light the way to better places. Outside my window, the Rosewood Estate, now the Hartley Foundation, glowed in the setting sun. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was learning to live without a safety net, working jobs he'd once thought beneath him. Vanessa had moved on to her next target, though word had spread about her gold-digging ways. But here, in this place built on appreciation instead of appearances, grandparents would find dignity. Children would find stability. And Eleanor Marie Hartley, too ugly for her grandson's wedding, had found her purpose. I wheeled myself to bed, no longer needing pearls or expensive dresses to know my worth. Tomorrow, the first families would arrive. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, I would sleep peacefully in my small apartment, rich beyond measure in the only currency that ever mattered: respect. Love couldn't be curated, edited, or filtered. It was messy and beautiful and real, and I was finally free to live it.